All right, folks, welcome to the Week 2 Collaborate session. So what we're going to be doing today is going through the slides for making arguments. This is basically a review of the slides we did in the lecture session. We're going to have a brief question and answer session, and once we're done with that, then we're going to have you take a look at the website I mentioned in the instructions for the essay, which is your logical fallacy is. So we're going to take a look at that once we're done with this. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and prep that real quick. All right, and let's go ahead and take a look through the slides. All right. So, just real quick here, we'll go through these slides, starting with making arguments. All right, to make an effective argument requires the examination of the issue close enough so that you understand it well enough, which means that the big key to these arguments is going to be research. Okay, you need to have plenty of facts to back up the reasoning you're going to give for whatever argument you're going to make. Once your research is complete, there's going to be 4 main tasks that you'll need to perform in order to create a good argument. Okay, one of them is to develop a main argument appropriate for the rhetorical situation. So again, looking over the rhetorical situation, know your audience, know your purpose for writing, know what your media is, and pretty much understand the circumstances that you are writing into. Okay, so that you can tailor your writing to fit that, and it'll be that much more persuasive. Make an appeal likely to be persuasive to your intended audience. What are they expecting? How are you going to reach them? How are you going to get them to understand what it is you're trying to say? Support your claim with appropriate evidence and/or reasoning. Okay. What is the evidence? What are the reasons that you have for backing your argument? And above and beyond that, what facts and evidence do you have to support those reasons? Okay. And then adopt a format and style appropriate for the rhetorical situation and medium. Okay. So once you have all of this stuff together, put it into writing. Get your essay together. Find a way to make it work. Okay. Start with developing a main argument. As a writer, you must have something to say. Okay, that's one of the first things that this textbook tells you in Comp 1. Same is true here. Exploration of the topic will help you to develop your main argument, but this is not the same as your position on the issue. Okay, we had this exercise I asked you guys to do in your journal, but it plays on to this process. Okay. It's a progression to the main argument going through 4 parts, starting with the topic. What are you writing about? Okay. What is your general topic or subject matter that you're working with? Then you have the problem. What needs to be fixed, or what questions are there about the topic? What are you focusing on within that bigger picture topic? Third is your position. How do you feel about the problem? What is your stance? How do you think the problem should be addressed? How do you think it should be solved? And then the main argument. What practical, actionable position can you take on the problem that aligns with your position? So this in itself is going to be the main thing that you're going to be arguing. And that is, what is it that we can do about the situation to make it better? Okay. All right, so this is the exercise I asked you to do for your journal. This is intended, if you will, to try to get you started thinking about a topic, okay? As you're going along with this, as you'll find with my classes, if you haven't taken anything from me before, I am very much about your agency in terms of subject matter. And that is to say, I want you to pick your topics rather than me picking them for you, because you're going to write better if you're the one in control of that. Okay, so the exercise is on page 177. The first one is to identify 3 issues that you feel strongly about and write a brief paragraph about each one explaining your position. Describe a main argument you might make supporting that position. That was one option. Okay. Second option, find 2 or 3 arguments about the same topic, preferably on different sides. Write a brief synopsis of each one, including a statement of the writer's main argument. Then compare the arguments and look at how each writer takes a stance and develops their arguments. Okay. Third option, think of 2 or 3 changes you would like to see at your campus or workplace. Then write a letter to your college president, principal, or boss to argue in favor of the changes, developing a main argument for each change. Okay, so the idea of the exercise is to pick one of those and write on that. Okay, write it in your journal to try to help you come up with a topic for your bigger essay here. Next one, considering a rhetorical situation. Now, remember what you talked about in Comp 1 in regards to rhetorical situations. These concepts apply equally to arguments. Okay. So some of the stuff you have to consider, especially in regards to audience. Audience is going to be the most important thing here. So 1, what is your audience's pre-existing knowledge about the topic or situation? Okay, what do they think? What do they know, or what do they think they know? You'll need to account for the audience's pre-existing knowledge and biases for or against your position and or your particular argument. Okay, so anything that your audience thinks they know about the subject, you have to keep in account. All right. Next, what is the audience's interest or stake in the issue? Okay. How does the argument affect the people you're directly addressing? Be sure that it does, even if they may not realize it yet. Now, situations like that make this more challenging. You will have to also argue that it does apply to them in addition to what solution works best for them. Okay. So if you have an audience that doesn't think that a situation applies to them, then you're going to have to convince them that it does, and then you're going to have to convince them of why your argued solution is the correct one. Okay? I think the perfect example of this is something I've seen circulating around quite a bit, where you have a lot of people who wonder why, I hate to go into politics here, but a lot of people wonder why so many working class people vote Republican, even though Republicans don't seem to do anything in general with their policies, tend to favor more wealthy people. Okay, in terms of giving them tax breaks, giving them more money, or things like that. Okay, this is because of this issue in that maybe they don't realize that the stuff that it's being argued about affects them. They don't think it applies to them, especially measures to reduce poverty or change tax brackets for the middle class or whatever. They don't think that applies to them because the way that they think of themselves is not as people who are living without. They think of themselves as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. Okay, they could be millionaires, but they can't. They're not there right now. But if they ever do get to that point, they want to have policies that are going to help them once they do get to that point. But the problem is they don't ever. Okay, so anybody who's arguing to try to help these individuals is going to have a two-edged sword here. Not only are they going to have to argue for the policy that they want to get passed and how it's going to help people, they also have to argue that it's even going to help them in the first place because these guys don't think it will. Okay, so you have to stoke the audience's interest or stake in the issue in order to get them to listen to your argument in the first place and then try to consider your solution. Next one here, what does the audience expect? What side of the argument is your audience? Are you approaching them as an ally or are you approaching them as an adversary? So basically your tone in the argument will be affected by your position in relation to them. And by this I mean your language choices. Okay? Anything that you put forth as part of your tone, as part of the way that you're presenting the issue, that's going to affect how they view you. Okay, so your tone needs to be probably as respectful as possible, okay, as much as possible. Approach them as an ally. You're going to be using familiar language. You're going to be using familiar terminology. Approaching as an adversary, you're going to be using stuff that's going to be very neutral. You do not want to use anything that could be potentially insulting to the audience, any kind of language choices that might do that. Okay? So all these have to be considered as you are writing. The next question is, do you have to win the argument? Now, as a reminder of this, this type of argument is not the same as an everyday argument, which is more akin to a fight than a discussion. Okay? That is to say, your argument does not necessarily have to be a winning argument in order to be influential. The main idea is to advance the knowledge presented on the subject. Okay? This is not about being competitive. This is about actually getting people to widen their scope of vision and understand a little bit more about the world around them. Okay? Occasionally, though, the point of an argument is to achieve common ground. Okay? And I showed you the example about the gun control argument. They can find common ground by finding a goal shared by all the participants. In this case, the shared goal is reducing violent crime. Okay? So, do you have to win the argument? Not necessarily. As long as you've opened some minds, you've succeeded. Okay? That's the main thing I want you to take away from this. All right, next. We're doing the exercises. These are the exercises for rhetorical situation. Okay? Once again, you're asked to choose an option, and I recommend that if you chose option 1 for the first exercise, pick option 1 for this one because it continues into this one. Okay? So option 1 for here, look at the arguments you previously composed and identify an appropriate audience for each argument. Write a brief description of each receptive audience. Once again, these were ones that I want you to do in the journals. Second, find a published argument you agree with on a topic you care about and think about what it would require to rewrite that argument for a different audience. Okay? Then you have the third one. Think about writing about a controversial topic to an audience opposed to your position. Summarize your position on the topic, then summarize your opponent's position. And then finally, identify some arguments that may appeal to the opposing audience to find common ground. Okay, so these three exercises, actually pick one, write about it in your journal. It's just like the previous one, okay? We're going to get into making a persuasive appeal now, okay? Writers use persuasion to strengthen arguments. Classical arguments typically use 3 types of appeals, okay? One of those appeals would be ethos, okay? Arguments based on the character of the speaker. For instance, the photo I have here, you probably couldn't see it in the lecture because my face cam was covering him, but that is the Dalai Lama, if you're not familiar. He's very influential when it comes to topics about diplomacy, peace, religion, that sort of thing. And he's qualified to speak on those things. This is a Nobel Prize. This is a Nobel laureate. Okay, he was won the Nobel Peace Prize, so he kind of knows this stuff, and he's qualified to talk about it. And you have pathos, arguments that are appealing to the emotions. Okay, making your audience feel something in order to advance an argument. Then the third one is logos, which is arguments based in reason and evidence. Okay. I believe in the lecture I referred to this as the galaxy brain appeal. You're basically trying to appeal to the highest intellect of your audience and make them understand that, hey, this is the logical path to take. Okay? So let's look at each one individually, starting with ethos. Okay? Appeal is based on character. Any argument which claims legitimacy by way of the person presenting it is making an appeal to ethos. Okay? So it's a appeal based on I have the credentials and I have the knowledge and I have the authority to present this. Okay? Your character as an individual influences this appeal. This is based on your accomplishments, position, angle of vision to the subject matter, education, and any other personal influences which make you more qualified to present an opinion on the topic. Okay? Who you are, what kind of relationship you have to the topic, what kind of credentials you have you studied the topic for a long time? These are all things that are going to influence whether you're going to be credible or not. Okay. Two examples that I gave you, and there is the exercise attached to those that I asked you to fill out on eCampus. I did see this. A number of you have done this already. Thank you very much. All right. So looking at how the credentials of the writer makes the writing more or less believable. Okay. Then we have pathos, appeals based on emotions. Okay. This is one of the riskiest types of persuasion because of the potential of abuse by the user. Okay. In the lecture, we talked about the ad misericordiam fallacy, where you're basically just preying on your audience's emotions. All right. You need to hang on a second here. I'm having some people are having issues getting into the session here. I'm going to try to fix this real quick. All right, let's see. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so again, it's really risky because you have to resist the urge to just play on emotions and not provide anything else. Okay, preying on the audience sympathy in lieu of any kind of logical argument is not acceptable. Okay, you need to still have some logical basis for your argument. In order to have a successful argument and to successfully use the appeal to emotion. Okay? The human experience includes emotion. Persuasive argument can use this to the arguer's advantage by making the audience feel like they need to agree with the argument on a purely emotional level. If you make them feel guilty enough, they will come to your side. Okay? Now, you have to have some good logical backing for your argument before you start thinking about making people feel guilty, okay? But you can use that to your advantage. Now, again, there were two examples that I presented and an exercise attached to that. Again, those of you who have completed the exercises on eCampus have done this as well, so thank you. So basically, the exercise was to look at the two writing samples I've listed here and talk about the emotions that they evoke. Okay, how do they make you feel? On the next slide here, logos, appeals based in reason and fact. All right, come on. Yeah, there we go. Reconnecting. There we go. All right. So I just had a little signal hiccup here, so forgive me. All right. So we have the logos appeal based in reason and fact. So the reason and fact has to be the basis of every well-reasoned argument. Okay. Logic. It's the rational structure for an argument, the factual reasons why your argument is correct. Okay. So keep in mind that you need to have some element of logic, even if you're relying more on emotional or ethical appeals, okay? Even if those are the primary centerpiece of your argument, you still need to have an element of logic. Now, there are two forms of logical appeal that you can work with, okay? One of them is inductive reasoning, which means you have a conclusion based upon factual evidence presented, okay? Your argument and conclusion in this case is based mostly in the facts you've researched and presented in favor of your argument. Okay, there is a sample of this on page 184. Is actually it's an article that's based in inductive reasoning. Okay, then we have deductive reasoning, beginning with a premise and working to a conclusion which follows a logical path from the initial generalization. In this case, the premise is the basis for the argument, and the facts presented align with that premise, leading to the final conclusion. Okay? So, if you're familiar with the concept of syllogism, that's a basic form of deductive reasoning, where you have subpremise A, subpremise B, therefore therefore supremacy. Okay? Or actually, I should say, subpremise A leads to subpremise B leads to subpremise C, therefore subpremise A leads to subpremise C. Okay? But that counts as deductive reasoning because by the process of deduction, you're determining that conditions are right. If the condition A exists, then C will lead directly from it. Okay? There's also a sample text for deductive reasoning as well. And don't worry too much about not getting this immediately. In 2 weeks, we actually have an entire session just about inductive versus deductive reasoning. Okay? That will be the primary topic of the lecture. So we'll go into a little bit more detail then. All right. Next is the exercise for the end of the chapter. This is making a persuasive appeal. Okay? This is exercise number 2. Exercise number 2, where you given 2 excerpts from argumentative essays, and asked to look for different types of persuasive appeals in each. Okay. You'll choose one of the excerpts and look for an individual type of appeal in your chosen excerpt. So basically, you are going through it and you're searching for the ethos appeal, the logos appeal, or the pathos appeal. Okay. One of those 3. All right, so next one here, classical argument assignment. Okay, so this is the actual instructions for this classical argument, this first essay. All right, in your, I want you to take some time to search for interesting topics and current events. Okay, it says 10 minutes. You can take as long as you need to, but hopefully not too long. Okay, I do suggest here. You want to look at news sites such as newspapers, news networks, or internet news aggregators like Yahoo News. All right. I want you to find a single general current events topic that you can agree can be worked with. You can work with. Okay. This is made if we're doing this in a team setting, so I'm kind of having to alter this a little bit here. But I want you guys to look for a topic. Okay. Find something in current events that you think you can work with and create an argument from. Okay? Read some information on the topic and choose an argument to make which aligns with your individual position on the topic. Okay? So whatever you feel about that topic, that's what you're going to be arguing. Focus on creating an argument to which there are agreeing and dissenting opinions. Okay? As I mentioned in the lecture, you do not want to have an argument that is basically a statement of fact, okay? Any good thesis statement for an academic paper is going to have a dissenting opinion, okay? It's going to be open to dissent and open to discussion. So that's what we want you to do here. I want you to find a way of approaching your topic so that you can make an argument and try to persuade people that you're on the right side of things, okay? Now, we will talk about what a classical argument contains. That's going to be next week. Initially, what I want you to do as you're looking for topics is focus on your persuasive techniques and the facts which will support your argument. So as you start up with drafting, start working with the arguments you're going to make and whatever persuasive techniques you want to use to get your idea across. Now, as far as the requirements for this essay, it should be a 3 to 5 page essay. That would be double space, 11 to 12 point font. Arial, Times New Roman, or Calibri are accepted. It needs to be in MLA format for name block, page numbers, works cited, and citations. Okay. A works cited page will be required. Okay. Just as a reminder for those who did my class last semester, this works cited should be separate from the rest of the essay and does not count toward the page count. Okay. You'll also need to cite your sources within the essay, MLA format for all citations and works cited page. Okay. So all the research that you do, anything you draw from that research has to be cited within the text. Now, your classical argument must have a clear structure and thesis statement. We should be able to tell what your argument is. Your argument and position must be clear in addition to the intended audience for your argument. So we need, not only do we need to have a clear idea of what you're arguing, but who you're arguing it in front of. Who is the audience that you are trying to reach? Okay? As much as possible, your argument must avoid any and all logical fallacies, which we're going to talk about here in a second. Okay, we're going to go through your logical fallacy is and do an overview of some very commonplace fallacies. Okay. Let's see. It does not say how many sources to use, but I would recommend a minimum of 4. Okay. I would recommend a minimum of 4 research sources for this essay. Now, this assignment is going to be due on February 19th, which is a Friday. The due time for that is February 19th at midnight. You need to have it turned in on eCampus. There will be 2 workshop weeks for this essay. The first workshop week is going to be February 8th, which is in 2 weeks. The week of February 8th is the revision workshop. Okay, so we're going to be focused on content there. The following week, the week of February 15th, which is also the week it's due, that's the proofreading and editing workshop. Okay, so that's going to be mostly polish. Okay, so just so you have an idea of what the scheduling is here on this. Okay, in 2 weeks, you need to do that first. We need to be having that first workshop, checking out the content, giving each other feedback on revisions. Following week is going to be proofreading and editing workshop. That's going to be grammar, spelling, mechanics. Okay? So, and the final due date of this is February 19th. Okay? All right, so we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. In the meantime, I'm going to get the website set up here. So anybody who has any questions, go ahead, use the raise hand button and let me know what you got.
You need my help? No? Look at you. Oh, that's that.
Okay. Okay, I have a question in the chat. For the reading, went away. For the reading passages, for the video lectures, can't seem to find the reading in MindTapper and the ebook link. Okay. All right, I will tell you where to find it here. Give me a second. I'm going to actually, I'm going to share this tab so you can see it. Just give me a second. You stop sharing those that one website. I got to share a different one. Chrome tab. All right, MindTap. All right, I'm going to share the proper screen. All right. All right, so here is the MindTap screen, okay? We need to look over here on the link here for full book. Open that up. I'm going to spread it open so it's completely across the screen. Table of contents. We're going to understanding argument. Okay. And we need to go to, let's see. Is this the right one? Let me see here. No, that's not the right one. Let's go to the next one. Let's see. All right, hold up. Persuasive appeal, that's what I want. Okay. All right, so if you're looking at this here, we're under the segment titled Making a Persuasive Appeal. Okay. The very bottom of this segment is called Exploring Persuasive Appeals, exercise 11E. And the as you can see here, the exercise number 2, that is where the articles are that you need for it. Okay. All the articles that I referenced in the slides are actually in this segment. Okay. So if you go to the full book, and you go to the table of contents and go to it's in the argument chapter. The segment of the argument chapter is making a persuasive appeal. It's 11-4A. Okay. Yeah. That's half the problem of this is that some of the books have different chapter layouts than the others. The instructors' versions put this stuff in chapter 7, but it turns out to be chapter 11 in the unabridged version. Okay. All right. So another 3 minutes here. If anybody else has any other questions, go ahead and raise your hand. Let me know you're there. And I can try to answer your question best I can, and then we'll move on to looking at the fallacies.
You are not there? Oh, so that's your head back. Oh, I thought it was Adam. How are you? Don't forget to write your temperature for morning. That's what I have to right now. Isn't that my job?
All right, Jacqueline, I see you there. What's your question? Okay. Assignments listed on the main MindTap page. Only the assignments with orange dots. Okay. Those are the ones that count towards your grade. Everything else is practice. All right, then. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on, and we're going to go to looking at logical fallacies. All right. So the website that I gave you in the instructions to try to help you with avoiding these is called Your Logical Fallacy Is. This is a site that's been around for years. is designed for you to look for these fallacies in social media. And specifically, they tell you if you spot somebody using one of these fallacies, you can link them to the description of that fallacy to try to encourage them not to commit it again. Okay? So pretty much I want to go over some of the the logical fallacies that come up a lot that you do not want to engage in, mainly, especially when you're doing classical arguments, because they will pretty much instantly invalidate your argument. It'll make it so that nobody's really going to believe you. Okay? So we have a complete list here of 24 fallacies. Okay? And we're going to take a look at, 16, 20, yeah, 24. Okay, we're going to take a look at some of the more commonplace ones, okay? Ones that you want to avoid. So, let's start first with the appeal to authority, okay? Here's their description. You said that because an authority thinks something, it must therefore be true, okay? It's important to note that this fallacy should not be used to dismiss the claims of experts or scientific consensus. Appeals to authority are not valid arguments, but nor is it reasonable to disregard the claims of experts who have a demonstrated depth of knowledge unless one has a similar level of understanding and or access to empirical evidence. However, it is entirely possible that the opinion of a person or institution of authority is wrong. Therefore, the authority that such a person or institution holds does not have any intrinsic bearing upon whether their claims are true or not. Okay, so basically if you commit this fallacy, you're basically saying that because somebody in a position of power said something, that must mean that it's truth and that you can believe it, okay, and that they should not be questioned, okay, or you're using that as a way to try to discredit somebody, okay. Such as they have an example here. Not able to defend his position that evolution isn't true, Bob says that he knows a scientist who also questions evolution and presumably isn't a primate. Okay? Another thing you gotta watch out for on this is the appeal to false authority. That is to say, you're consulting someone who is not qualified in the field or with any kind of credentials that are properly recognized, and saying that because they said so, that must mean it's true, okay? And discredit any other opposing arguments, okay? An example of this is the anti-vax groups, okay? Not just considering that the main guy that they are following is Andrew Wakefield, who lost his medical license over poorly researched anti-vax writings. You also have them following behind Jenny McCarthy, who's not a medical professional. The only thing she presents is anecdotal evidence, which is sketchy at best. Okay, so. Appeal to authority, you do not want to fall into that trap. Okay, go into the next one. Okay. All right. Next one we're going to look at. Let's see. No. Yeah, this one's good. Okay. So we're going to go with the special pleading fallacy. You move the goalposts or made up an exception when your claim is shown to be false. Okay. This is especially bad when you do not want to do because you're basically saying, okay, I don't accept your version of things, so I'm going to make it even harder for you to win this argument. Okay. Humans are funny creatures and have a foolish aversion to being wrong. Rather than appreciate the benefits of being able to through better understanding, many will invent ways to cling to old beliefs. One of the most common ways that people do this is to post-rationalize a reason why what they thought to be true must remain to be true. It's usually very easy to find a reason to believe something that suits us, and it requires integrity and genuine honesty with oneself to examine one's own belief and motivations without falling into the trap of justifying our existing ways of seeing ourselves and the world around us. Okay, so basically, what they're saying is trying to continuously change the conditions of the argument so that you're never in the wrong or that you never lose. That is a logical fallacy in and of itself, because you need to give up at some point. Okay? At some point, somebody's going to prove you wrong, and you're going to run out of excuses. Okay? Look at their example. Edward Johns claimed to be psychic, but when his abilities were tested under proper scientific conditions, they magically disappeared. Edward explained this, saying that one had to have faith in his abilities for them to work. Pretty convenient. Okay? This is basically the logical equivalent of playing cops and robbers as a kid, having that one kid who you point your finger gun at and go bang bang, you're dead, and he turns around and says, I'm not dead, I'm wearing a bulletproof vest. Okay? That's the kind of level of maturity that we're dealing with that particular fallacy. Okay? Where is it? There it is. Okay. I want to talk about this one because I actually mentioned it in the lecture. Okay. I've mentioned this in the lecture when I talked about using the I haven't got that lecture yet. Okay. I apologize. I'm recording these lectures 2 weeks in advance, and I'm starting to lose track. Okay. This is actually going to get mentioned next week. I'm going to talk about the Texas Sharpshooter Fallacy. Okay. You commit this when you cherry pick a data cluster to suit your argument or find a pattern to fit a presumption. Okay. It's part of a category of fallacies called false cause. Okay. There's also one called a post hoc fallacy. Comes from a Latin phrase post hoc ergo propter hoc. Okay. Because this happened, then that happens. Okay. Example of the post hoc fallacy would be something like, we don't invite this person to parties because every time they come, it rains. Okay, basically say disregarding causation does not mean causation. I will get this straight here. Okay, correlation does not mean causation. Okay. It's basically blaming coincidence on an individual that has no control. Okay. Texas Sharpshooter has a funny story where it comes to its name. Okay. The name of the Texas Sharpshooter Fallacy comes from an old legend from West Texas involving a man who was in possession of a barn that had a number of targets painted on it, and through every single target there was a single bullet hole right through the dead center in the bullseye. Okay. So people admired this guy and thought he must be the most accurate shot I've ever seen. How can you explain all these disparate targets? Well, after his death, his wife was getting ready to tear down the barn, and people are asking his wife, "Hey, why are you going to tear down this barn? It's your husband's great achievement. He was this great sharpshooter." And the wife responds to this, says, "What are you talking about? He couldn't aim straight to save his own life. What he actually did was he just fired randomly into the side of the barn and then painted targets around the bullet holes to make himself look better." Okay, so this concept gets applied to statistics. Okay, the Texas Sharpshooter Fallacy means that you are taking a small section of statistical and a bigger picture, because most times the bigger picture will prove you wrong. Okay? Look at their example here. The makers of Sugarette candy drinks point to research showing that of the 5 countries where Sugarette drinks sell the most units, 3 of them are in the top 10 healthiest countries on Earth. Therefore, Sugarette drinks are healthy. Okay? So not exactly a ironclad logical leap there. Okay? I got time for maybe 2 more of these. You can definitely explore this on your own. Okay, in fact, I would encourage it because this will help you to understand why these are bad and why these are things that you need to avoid. Okay. Let's go with the two that have been showing up an awful lot in the news. Okay. Here's one: tu quoque. Okay. The tu quoque fallacy, avoiding having to engage with criticism by turning it back on the accuser. In other words, you're answering criticism with criticism. Okay? Now, what this literally translates to is you too. Okay? You could also call this the I'm rubber, you're glue fallacy. Okay? It's appeal to hypocrisy, commonly employed as an effective red herring because it takes the heat off someone having to defend their argument and instead shifts the focus back onto the person making the criticism. Okay? So, another term that comes about from this tu quoque fallacy, another name for it that's been in the news a lot in the last 4 years is whataboutism, because it's a very common practice when you're trying to defend an indefensible policy. Okay, instead of engaging in the criticism of the policy, what the person is doing is actually deflecting the criticism and saying, what about these people who are doing something that I think is worse? Okay, it's basically trying to say that whoever is making the accusation is being a hypocrite about it. Okay, this was a technique that was very commonly used in communist nations, particularly Soviet Union, compared to the United States. Okay, in recent years, it was used by domestic politicians as a way of avoiding defending some of the more onerous policies that the government had come up with. Okay, so if you take a look here, take a look at the example. Nicole identified that Hannah had committed a logical fallacy, but instead of addressing the substance of her claim, Hannah accused Nicole of committing a fallacy earlier on in the conversation. Okay? So we're not engaging with the actual argument, we're actually saying, you did it yourself, so why are you looking at me? Okay? That's not an approach to take. All right, the other one we're going to look at is the begging the question fallacy. Okay. When we're begging the question, you're presenting a circular argument in which the conclusion was included in the premise. All right. This logically incoherent argument often arises in situations where people have an assumption that is very ingrained and therefore taken in the minds as a given. Okay. Oh, there we go. All right. All right, then. So the logically incoherent argument often arises in situations where people have an assumption that is very ingrained and therefore taken in their minds as a given. Okay? Circular reasoning is bad mostly because it's not very good. Okay? Basically, you're saying that the conclusion is included in the premise basically means that I'm saying this is true because I'm always right, and if I'm saying this is true and I'm always right, that means that this is true because I'm always right. Okay, it just goes circle, 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 circle. Okay? The example I give here is a great example of this. The word of Zorbo the Great is flawless and perfect. We know this because it says so in the great and infallible book of Zorbo's best and most truest things that are definitely true and should not ever be questioned. Okay? Obviously, Zorbo the Great is some kind of penny ante dictator who put out his own version of Mao Zedong's Red Book, Little Red Book, and has decided that he's going to try to enforce the fact that he is always right. Okay. All right. So there's also another version of this that I always like to share. If you're familiar. I don't know if you're familiar with this guy. He is Australian. There's a comedian out there named Tim Minchin. He's a stage actor and comedian, musician as well. He does comedy shows where he integrates a lot of singing. Okay, and a lot of his shtick comes from two sources. One, he has a psychology degrees, so he likes to mess with his audience's minds and expectations a lot. Okay, that's where half his comedy comes from. The other part is he is a virulent atheist and is highly critical of religion, especially Catholicism, because there have been scandals in Australia, just like in the US, involving pedophile priests. In fact, he does a lot of stuff about how priests can't be trusted because of those scandals. Okay? Now, one of the songs that he does actually ties into this, and the first two lines of it are basically this begging the question fallacy. He has a song called The Good Book. Okay? And he's basically riffing on highly conservative evangelical Christians. Okay, with this song, it's basically in terms of the ones who feel that they don't need a book learning because if we got the Bible, what more do we need to know? Okay, it's kind of a stereotype image, but there are people out there like that. Okay, so he did this song called A Good Book. And the way that the song starts out, the first two lines, I only read one book, but it's a good book, don't you know? I know that it's a good book because the good book tells me so. He's just created the begging the question circular logic fallacy. Okay? So, just take your time with this. Take a look at the different fallacies that are there. And you'll know what you should avoid putting into your own, okay? Look for those fallacies and make sure that you don't use them in your own writing, okay? All right, so we got about, I'm going to say 5 minutes left here. If anybody has any questions, go ahead, raise your hand. Let me hear them. Okay, we did talk about this at the end of the slides here. What I want you guys to be doing is looking in the news, looking at current events, finding a topic from there, and then finding something within that topic that you can argue, and it has a dissenting opinion. Okay, some kind of issue within that topic that people are arguing over, and you need to choose a side with it. Something with discourse would be perfect, okay? Especially the minimum wage thing, just in the news yesterday, because they're going to try to pass a $15 minimum wage. That would be absolutely a good topic for this, okay? Because there are multiple sides on this, and you can take one side, try to argue for that side, try to refute the opposition. Okay, let's see. Can we go to the New York Times sites, take an article, and make a summary, then discuss that for the argument's topic? Yeah, you can do that. Now we need to you need to use that as the basis for the topic. But again, we're talking about stuff. We want to talk about stuff that has discourse, where you can there's a dispute that's going on, and you want to take a side in that dispute. Okay. To get the topic, that's perfect, okay? Just as long as you can find a disputed argument within that topic. That's the main thing we want to look at, okay? All right, so I think we'll go ahead and cut you guys loose here for this session. Thanks for coming. We will go ahead and have another one of these next week. There'll be another lecture posted on Monday. Let me just take a second here. I believe it's going to be about organization. I'm going to take a look real quick. Yeah, this is about, next week's lecture is going to be about structure for an argument, okay? So, so you guys be ready for that. We do have a second discussion topic up on the discussion board. Make sure you're doing those. Make sure you're doing the exercises within the video lectures. And that's pretty much it. Also, obviously, MindTap, okay? Get started looking for your topics for these classical arguments. Get started probably with drafting would be a good idea. In 2 weeks, we'll have a workshop. Okay. So with all that said, thanks for coming by, and I'll see you next week.